Hey, welcome. This is Bob Ambrogi, and today we're going to be getting a demonstration of the product Align. And joining us to show it to us and tell us about it is the founder and CEO, Sam Davidoff. Sam, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Good to be here.
So, before we launch into the product, why don't you kind of give us the nutshell of what it is and why you started it?
Yeah. So let me actually start with the second question first, and my answer will explain why I started with the second question first, which is I'm a lawyer by training. So
We won't hold that
one
against you. That's
one thing
okay.
I learned is don't answer the question asked, right? So no, so I was a lawyer for most of my professional career. I was a litigator. I spent most of my time at the law firm Williams and Connolly in Washington, D.C. I was a partner there, a litigation partner, had a what I think for our firm was a sort of traditional, mix of litigation cases, which all sort of were held together by the common thread of whatever I could do to get into court. I was a trial lawyer. I loved going to trial. I loved doing it. And that was what I did. And frankly, sort of thought that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I was happy doing it. Um, I'll say like phenomenal firm and only place I would practice law. And so I did that. But I will say that one of the things as a lawyer that I was frustrated by in general, to be honest with you, was the technology we had available, and particularly around my inability to find good ways to get off of paper. And I'll tell you this story. I got out of law school in 2003 and I started at a firm, and I was convinced I felt myself to be a pretty tech forward person. And I was convinced I'm going to be the paperless lawyer. And I went out in 2003 and I bought like IBM at the time had these ThinkPads. I think this was even before they were Lenovo, had these ThinkPads that, you could turn around the screen and you could write on them. And I went out and on my own with my, first paycheck as a associate, went out and bought one of those. And I was like, I'm going to be the paperless lawyer. And and by the way, this was before like security was a thing. So you could just
Right.
do whatever you
Firms let
wanted.
you do that.
Right. Um,
Before BYOD was a
exactly,
bad word.
exactly. So I did it and I was paperless. Fast forward, 10, whatever years it was, when I made partner. And certainly by the time I stepped back from the practice of law, my office was covered with binders and stacks of yellow pads. And I'd literally regressed. And that always bothered me. And I couldn't figure out why. And I had some ideas. And one of the ideas I had was just we actually need applications that are purpose built for lawyers to get us off of the paper and into a digital format. And so I started with the one that was really most burning to me. And so I ended up started building it while I was at the firm. I went part-time and then eventually that sort of took over. And I actually retired completely from the practice of law a couple years ago and I'm doing this. So,
And you had coding background on top of
and
all
I had
that,
some coding
as
background.
witnessed by
Yes,
that Macintosh behind over your shoulder, right?
that's exactly right. I learned to code in the dark old days of the black and white Macintosh. And to be honest, it was something that I loved when I was a teenager and had always sort of kept it up a little bit on the side as a lawyer. It had some, I did a lot of litigation as it turned out with technology companies, and I could do things like be the lawyer who could take the source code deposition or things like that. And I loved it. So that was actually sort of a welcome thing to come back to that and certainly helpful. But the problem that I focused on was in particularly around this question of binders, like the stereotype of the lawyer walking into court with, a briefcase stacked full of binders or dragging a cart of binders behind them or, on the airport with their lip bag is not really a stereotype. It's actually the reality. And it's the reality even in 2026. And it was certainly the reality when I started this company in 2020. My kind of I would say my motivation was twofold. One is I don't think it's just an accident of history that lawyers are using binders and refuse to give them up, essentially. I think it's actually because they work very well. And I was equally as guilty of it as anyone. I think they're tremendous ways to sort of organize and modularize information. So I think they're great tools. And I think the reason that they haven't been digitized is just that when people make efforts to digitize the binder, it's typically this isn't 100% true, but it's often an afterthought on some other product. Well, could you, why not just put your stuff in a folder? Why not just, have that as, part of your OneNote or something like that? And my view at the time, and this is sort of when I put my money where my mouth is in terms of the product is no, you need a binder solution that really works like those physical binders, really is adapted to the way litigators in particular like to use their physical binders. And out of that idea was born Align, which is a product whose really sort of sole and only purpose is to try to be the best digital binder that we can make.
So the problem wasn't binders, but it was paper, basically.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And so you've attempted to address that problem. I'm just trying to think, was there like nothing else on the market when you started to develop this? Did you kind of look around and were there other, I mean, I can think of some now I'm not a litigator, but I can think of some products that I think are dedicated to addressing this issue. I won't name them, but I mean, did you look around and you weren't satisfied with what was out there?
And here's what I would say. I would say I sort of ran into two things. And in truth, even now when I look at the market, I'd say I actually do think there are some companies now that frankly are my competitors and I think are seeing I disagree with some things that they're doing, but in general, I think are focused on this issue as well. But when I looked at this particularly at the time, two things are what I saw. One is, first of all, if you were not a lawyer and you were not working at a firm and you just went onto the Apple App Store and tried to say, I want a workflow that sort of replicates what a binder does, you have a lot more options. There are tools that are out there, that you can download, some of which are well established, some of which are some guy made it in his basement and released it 3 months ago, but that solve at least various parts of the problem. I don't know that any of them are sort of tailor-made to lawyers, but I think you could cobble something workable together. When you're inside a law firm, really when you're almost any kind of lawyer, but certainly a lawyer at even a modestly sized law firm, that constraint, or you have this constraint of you need enterprise security, you need something that is going to meet all those requirements and is also going to sort of integrate with firm systems, allow you to sync with your team. So that's a barrier that all of a sudden limits your options. And then you're limited to sort of the suite of enterprise tools. And I guess what I would say on that is I don't think any of them really got it. I'll pick on one because it's a big one and they won't mind it, which is Microsoft OneNote. It's a great product with tons and tons of bells and whistles. Tons of people use it. I used it a lot. And I tried for many, many years to make it into a binder solution. And it's not that it's a bad product, far from it. It's a great product. But that's just not what it's, the designers who designed it, that isn't what they were focused on. And I think we litigators have built up, sort of decades of kind of how we like the things to work. And when we get into the product, I can show you some examples. And I think sort of unless you're focused on it, you're not going to make it. And that's kind of what I found the state of the art to be.
Yeah. And do you think that those preferences of litigators of what they like in a binder product are somewhat universal? I mean, obviously you probably came to develop your own idea of what a binder should be. And I don't know if other litigators how much consistency there is among litigators on what a binder should be or is.
Yeah. What I would say is yes and no. I think that there certainly are things that are idiosyncratic and that lawyers develop their own habits and own opinions on how to do things. And actually, one of the things in designing the product was to keep it flexible enough, not opinionated on those types of things so that lawyers have that flexibility. But I do think there are certain things that are universal, and I'll put them into two buckets. One is there are things that are universal because I think binders, again, maybe not every single lawyer, but this idea that in litigation in particular, that you have this massive amount of information and you sort of have to reduce it down into modules of information that you can sort of reason about in the moment is pretty universal, right? If you're litigating, a 5-year-long securities litigation case about conduct that took place over, 10 years, you can't hold the whole case in your head at any one time. And so binders, I think, actually sort of mirror the way lawyers think about things, which is I'm going in to argue the motion to dismiss on jurisdiction. All I want to think about are the cases on jurisdiction and maybe whatever facts are relevant to jurisdiction. And I just need to hold that in my head. Making that into a binder is very natural. And I would go so far as to say universal. So that's one thing. And then the second thing there are just things, there's a part of the practice of litigation that is just mechanical, right? When you're examining a witness, at some point you got to hand them the document, right? Everyone's got all kinds of different ways that they examine witnesses, but at some point you got to hand them the document. And so if you want to convert that into digital form, you got to think through that issue, and that's not going to really matter who the lawyer is. There are other examples of things like that. But so there are some things that I just think at least litigation as a skill does kind of force you into a little bit of a channel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, should we jump into the demo and put
Yeah,
a picture with the
absolutely.
words here?
Great. So here we go. Great. So here I am on my iPad, and this is where I'm on my iPad. Let me just back up and say the product is actually really, it works on your iPad, on your desktop in a browser, and most importantly, it syncs between all of those things. And that's really important for workflows like, I'm in the hotel getting ready for a deposition tomorrow, and I realize there are 4 documents I need that aren't in my binder, and my paralegal or my colleague back in the office can put those in on his or her desktop, and I immediately can see them on my iPad. That's very important. But let me start with the iPad. So I open up my iPad, and I'm presented here with my matters, right? Very traditional way for lawyers to organize things is by, client matter. And that's we are not fighting City Hall on that. Things are organized by your clients and your matters. And I come into one
And
and I'm
this
going
is
to
a
pick
native
this.
app, not a browser.
And this is a native app. That's exactly right. No, and that was a decision that we made early on that this be a native iPad application because your quality of life is a lot higher. So anyway, we made that decision and it's worked out really well. So you come in here and you're presented with sort of the virtual equivalent of what I was just complaining about when I left as a partner, which is your bookshelf of binders, for that matter. And the first thing I want to say is, if what I'm about to say is not true, it means I've failed. So what you see here really should be immediately familiar if we're doing our job, familiar to any litigator, which is on the left is my list of binders. And for example, here I picked this argument binder. And this really should look like an argument binder. I have a couple of tabs. I have a briefing tab. I have my cases. In the briefing tabs are my pleadings. And the cases tab are the research I've done. And hypothetically, this is to get something I might use to get ready for an argument or in the argument. I come in and I have the complaint. I I can tab through the documents just like I would through a physical binder. Very familiar. By the way, I think that's critical to lawyers, right? Because I'm sure that you know this, right? This is a common complaint in legal tech, which is lawyers don't like to learn new things. And my answer is, that's right, they don't. You kind of got to make it look familiar. And so that's sort of a key component of this. And similarly, just like in a binder, you can immediately start to physically interact with the document. And by the way, you asked earlier about the native iPad application, and being able to use the Apple Pencil and being able to use kind of all of that stuff is really sort of a joy with this application. So I can come in here, let's say I'm reading this case, and I come in and I see, something that I want to highlight here. Use a yellow highlighter. This is just, familiar as breathing to a lawyer, right? I come in and I highlight the case. More than that, I come in and I want to take some notes on the case. I'll pick a blue pencil or a blue pen. This is key, just like I would do with a physical binder, right? And that's the point. It's just meant to be incredibly, incredibly familiar. Now, having said that, there are some really cool things you get when you go digital that are like a nice, just easy add-on for the lawyer. And one of them is, you have all these notes that you're taking digitally, but it's synced everywhere. So now I could say, I could call up or email or next time I'm talking to a colleague on the case and say, I thought in the, whatever this is, the Zoland case, this portion was really key. And I highlighted that portion. They could open it up on theirs and see where you highlighted it. That kind of ability to sort of share things back and forth. And we've done some cool things around that, which is give a little bit of a sort of technical explanation of what we do here. We don't actually let you edit the document directly. So it looks like I just took notes and highlights on this. But in fact, what we do is we save every user's notes as a little bit of a layer on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so practically speaking, if I'm the lawyer and I'm looking at this and I say, I want to read this case clean. I don't want to see my old notes. We have a little tab up here on the top left. I hit none and boom, my highlighted notes go away. Now I want to see my notes again. I hit mine here and I see my notes. And this obviously isn't going to work on this document because I'm just me as edited, but that all one would let me see my colleagues' notes. And so this is a great sort of digital add-on that you actually couldn't do this in the old days of physical binders, which is we can actually work together in the binder, right? You can say, I highlighted these things in red. Sam, what do you think? I can be sitting on my iPad looking at it and say, yeah, I agree with that. Let me add my own, write my own notes on the side. Or I can say to an associate, could you highlight the key portions of that deposition for me? They do it, and it immediately shows up on my iPad. So you
Is
get these sort of
Just a quick question. Is the sharing with colleagues done on a binder by binder basis or how does that work?
both. So from a security perspective, everything is done on a matter level, right? A case level. So in general, you only have access to the cases that you have access to, which the firm sets up for you. Within a case, we basically have two permission levels. One is everybody can see it, or one is it's private. So I can certainly have a binder where I can say, I don't want anyone to see this. I want to take my own notes. I don't want you can do that. That's actually less common. I find mostly what people want to do is everyone on my case team can see it. And that's our default model, is that everyone can see it. So anyone could come into my binder. They couldn't edit my notes, but they could see my notes and take their own notes, and I could see their notes. So that kind of digital sharing is a nice add-on. Other things that you get. So one thing, and you asked before, Bob, about, are things universal? And I gave this answer about sort of mechanics. And let me give you an example of that. So let's say I'm using this as my, binder, and I'm arguing to the court. So in the old days of physical binders, I would get ready for the argument. I'd read my binder, I'd mark up my cases just like I was doing there. And now I'm in court and the judge asks me a question about a case or the brief, and I need to get right to where I am, right? I need to get to not just to the document the judge is asking about, but exactly to the page the judge is asking about. Same thing could happen. I'm cross-examining a witness and I need to, impeach them with something, anything like that. I'd say the tried and true, I dare say universal method among litigators is the sticky note, right? You put a little sticky note on that page so you can find it. And we've replicated that kind of thing in digital. So these little sort of sticky note icons that you see on the left that are appearing next to documents, first of all, they just serve as an indicator like, oh, this is a document that I edited and I marked up. But actually, even cooler than that, if I tap on one of them with my finger, I immediately see the page that I marked up, or the pages that I marked up if I've marked up multiple pages. And so I can and I would actually say I'm faster with the iPad doing this than I would be in court with a physical binder, because the judge asks me, Mr. Davidoff, what about the Fraley case? And I immediately say, oh, Your Honor, I hit that, I find the page I marked up, and I'm immediately talking about that case with the judge. Those kind of mechanics are, first of all, it's one of the things I think having a product built by a litigator gives you, like, for better or worse in my life. These are the kinds of things I think about. But I think these are the kinds of things that are a little bit the universal language of lawyers. It's kind of how we work with documents, how we work with our tools. And that's what we've tried to put into the product here.
And lawyers are also thinking about exactly that issue example you just gave, which is the judge asks you a question and you need to put your finger on the answer quickly. You don't want to be trying to find where did I have that? Where is that?
You're exactly right. No, exactly. So those kinds of mechanics are really critical to the product. I'll give you another one. The one I mentioned earlier is I said, now this is, I'll use this. Imagine that this binder was instead a binder that I was using with a witness in court, a witness in a deposition, and I wanted to show the witness the document. And I had the document teed up. I had the portion that I'd highlighted that I want to show the person. And the most natural thing in the world would be to hand it to them. And in the paper world, I would have a copy of it and I'd hand them the copy and they would look at it and we'd talk about it. What will occur to lawyers' heads right away is, wait a minute, you can't hand them your iPad. First of all, your notes are there on the iPad. Second of all, they're going to start flipping around to other documents and things like that. And that's exactly right. You can't do that. Except that we built in tools to let you do that. And so, for example, what you can do in 2 seconds on a line is you can say, I'm going to turn this to none, turn off my notes. I'm going to click this little lock button here. And now I've locked the witness I just rotated the screen. I've locked the witness into this document. I can hand them the iPad. There's literally, they can go through this document. They can look at whatever they want in the document, but they can't get out of the document unless you hit unlock, and it's going to ask me for my password, and only I know. Just another example of these kind of ergonomics that if you weren't, if you're not to the manner born, if you haven't been raised as a litigator in doing this, it's just, they wouldn't necessarily come into your mind, except they're critical. It's the thing that comes up, all the time
Right.
when you're
Right.
litigating cases.
Yep.
So look, by the way, I will say in general, I've just shown you the product. And there is a kind of simplicity to it, which is the point. And, what I have just shown you, sort of, reading your documents, marking them up, being able to use them in sort of live, real world situations in court with a witness. By the way, one of the things and one of the reasons that we went with a native application, the app will work when you go offline too. So it doesn't have to have an internet connection. Well, you can download things in advance. And if you lose your internet connection or it's weak, it goes into an offline mode and you can keep working. Again, something that's really critical when you're, if you're working on an airplane. Nowadays, a lot of them have Wi-Fi, but even that's not always reliable. Or you're in court, right? I mean, you can't be in court and the court's internet's not working that day. There's no, Your Honor, we need to take the day off because of that. So that kind of thing. So,
Can I ask you a quick question on that?
Please, yeah.
So I'm just curious, where are the documents being stored by default? Are they being stored on a law firm server or in a cloud somewhere, or what's the?
Great question. We have a couple deployment models, but in general, the answer is there is a server. Right? So there is a centralized server that whether you're accessing the app through the browser or through the iPad, it's communicating back to a centralized server. Where does that server live? We actually have a few deployment models. If you're a single user, a solo practitioner, or just a few person law firm, we offer a sort of traditional SaaS version of the product. We host the data, it's obviously segregated. Matters are segregated from everyone else's, but we host the data. What our law firm customers, certainly our big law firm customers, even most of our medium and smaller size customers do, we offer them the ability to deploy it themselves, either in their own private cloud in an Azure tenant or actually on premise. We support on-premise deployment, and you wouldn't know it from, reading the tech news, but there's a lot of on-premise deployment that still goes on inside of law firms.
Yep. No, I know that.
And we support that. So that's sort of the source of truth, is the server. And then we have various mechanisms, particularly for the iPad, to let it store things locally and securely. We offer various versions of our applications that are enabled to work with various mobile device management solutions to give the law firms that kind of lockbox security. So we integrate with Intune, with BlackBerry, with Citrix, all these different providers that offer, all offer their own slightly different flavor on how to let the law firm, lock down the iPad and, make sure the data doesn't leak out and things like that.
And when you get, there's the desktop version, there's the iPad version. Are they pretty much similar in terms of their functionality, or are there differences between them?
Two big differences on the desktop version. In general, yes, everything I showed you on the iPad here, there's some slight differences because it's in a browser, but the same idea works. And in fact, you can use it, if you have if you have my old Lenovo tablet that spins around and is running Windows, you can open it in the browser and write on it and take your notes and everything just like that. The browser version is where the binders are created and updated. So there's a whole binder editor feature for doing that. And it's drag and drop. It's very intuitive. I can actually show you that if you want. Why don't I switch over? This will take 2 seconds.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm showing you the desktop version of the app. I went back into that same binder that we were looking at. And as you can see, looks pretty much the same. Those documents are there. That, notes that I took on this document are there that I just took on my iPad. They've synced to the the web version, as you'd expect. The things that are here that are unique on the browser version are, one, editing the binder or creating it. And that is, we try to make this for, paralegals, assistants, lawyers who are doing this, super easy. So adding new documents, is as simple as dragging a document in, putting it where you want, and there it is. I don't want to mess up my nice argument binder, so I'll take it out. But it's very, we try to make everything what you see is what you get. You drag things in, you drag them around, again, similar to what you would have done, assembling the physical binder. So that's one thing, is putting them together. And we have some nice, again, the kind of ergonomics I talked about for litigators that are universal to litigators. The same thing in truth applies, and with equal importance, to the people who are putting together your binders, the paralegals, the litigation assistants. They have day-to-day realities that they deal with, and problems that come up all the time. I'll give you a simple example, but it's a very classic problem of the lawyer comes in and says to an assistant, I'm about to go interview witness X. I already interviewed witness Y. I want 7 of the documents from that binder from witness Y to be in the document for witness X, in the binder for witness X. So get those for me. And I highlighted portions, and, that's a little bit of a nightmare. That's the kind of use case. We have this from binder feature here that allows somebody to, whoever's making the binder to go in, and then literally pull the same documents out of that binder and copy them into this binder. All the notes transfer. You get the idea. Those kinds of quality of life make the workflow easier, make the workflow adapted to what, the folks on the ground making binders. Those kinds of things we build it on that side too, because it's honestly as critical to the good experience that the people back at the office putting the binders together and getting them out to you are able to do it quickly and efficiently as it is for that lawyer to be, quick and efficient in front of the judge. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is on the other end, exporting the binders, getting them out, if you need to send them to opposing counsels, file something with the court, whatever. God forbid, if you might need to print something, we have the export feature on the binder, and that's very cool too. It makes a little zip package that has all your documents in the correct order, with or without your notes. You get to choose. It makes the index for you. Again, tries to take a lot of that tedious grunt work that goes on in doing that these days. We automate all of that.
And can you export just portions of it? Select
Yeah, you can export.
tabs
You
or
can
something like
export
that, or-
individual documents and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a ton of options around that. We have this. I won't go through them all, but this is our export pane. It gives you all kinds of options of things you can do to kind of make the export look as consistent and kind of in the way you want as you'd like.
Anything else that you wanted to highlight about this?
On the product, I would say the product also, by the way, does allow for some shared note taking. I won't go into that in detail. It's a nice to have feature. I would say we are not OneNote, but it is a lot of times it's useful to be able to have notes on the side that you can share with your teammates, share on a per matter basis. And so we have that. And again, we try to enable some things that are convenient to litigators, like, having start and stop times for meetings and who was there and things like that. But in general, it's a basic note-taking function. We've tried not to let it distract from what we think we do best, which is make binders, give litigators, just digital equivalents for the binders that they've used for decades.
Are there products that again, I'm asking this question a little bit naively because I'm not quite sure what the market is, but are there products that you integrate with in any way or would want to integrate with in any way? Or
Yeah, so the products that we for sure integrate with are the firm security systems. That's been our most important thing for us, right? So to ensure that we have single sign-on with the firms, whether they're using Azure or Entra or Active Directory, to integrate with all that, as I said before, with their mobile device management system. That's been our most critical integration, because I really think, especially for a product like this, it's table stakes to integrate with the firm's security. I would say we would like at some point to integrate with some of the other document providers like the DMSs of the world and the discovery platforms. I view that as a nice to have, not a need to have. We're doing something a little different than what they're doing, but I could imagine a world where we do that. The integration that we're most excited about is not going to shock you, is integration with AI. And in particular, I have a kind of very my own perspective on how best to do that. But it basically involves that I think, and this is what we're implementing with Align, is we're going to expose ourselves to whatever the LLM, the AI of choice that the law firm wants to use, so that essentially whatever AI platform they're using can interact with Align, right? So now instead of going in and making your binder by hand, you'll be able to say to ChatGPT, or a legal specific AI, go into Align, gather all the documents with this witness's name from, this date and put them in an Align binder for me. And then the lawyer can just pick up their iPad and start reading those documents. So we're very excited about that integration. And we're probably a few months away from that, but that's something that I think will make the product even more efficient and more automatable.
You mentioned that you'd been a litigator at Williams and Conley. Do you see this as directed at any particular type of litigation practice, size of firm, anything like that? Or is it broadly available for any lawyer at any size firm?
It's certainly broadly available for any lawyer at any size firm. And we have lawyers from solo practitioners all the way through AmLaw 100 firms using it. What I would say is that some of the value that we deliver in terms of security integrations, in terms of these collaboration team features, are more valuable in those bigger firms, that both have the various security restrictions and requirements, and also they just have bigger teams working on bigger cases. So I think those firms get additional value out of the product, but it is available. It's available for anyone. Buy it now. And we have people using it productively at those lower levels.
Yeah, and is it priced in a way where is it just priced on a SaaS model, or is it how do you charge?
No, it reflects. So we have the SaaS product for those smaller firms, and that is priced like a SaaS product.
Yeah.
We charge $125 a month, and that's basically
affordable.
And we try to make that sort of a price point that makes sense. If it saves you an hour of billable time, you're already ahead of the game. And then for law firms, we have an enterprise pricing model, which is actually, we customize it for individual firms, but the economics work out around the same. The biggest difference with our enterprise pricing is there's kind of an upfront cost to us to help the firm get set up and to kind of get that and to support them. And so we have a minimum requirement. But at the end of the day, the per user cost is actually roughly the same as our SaaS product for law firms. And the truth is, if the law firms buy, big licenses, they actually end up with economies of scale on that.
Yeah. And you mentioned AI. Is there any other stuff kind of on the roadmap that you want to continue to build out on this?
So it's funny. There are a number of things on the roadmap that I will not talk about because they're incredibly boring, even though they're important. Because I do think about these things about, for example, I'll give you one that's maybe like sort of boring, which is right now our product depends on the documents being OCR'd when they come into the product. We're about to release an addition to our product that OCRs everything automatically. A lot of people honestly assumed we had that already, so it's not a very interesting feature. But what I have found in doing this business is you kind of got to mix. There are the features that are exciting and sexy and help you sell the product. And then there are the features that you have to build them into the product because they're just necessary. And so what I would say for 2026 is getting this AI stuff out is our cool, exciting feature. And then there's a lot of just, making sure that the drywall is where it should be and, making sure that the foundation doesn't have any cracks that we kind of try to continue working on. And that's probably what's the rest of our roadmap for 2026.
Yeah. Apart from if I'm not at an enterprise size firm or if I don't have the kind of the security issues, if I'm in a solo or a small firm and I want to start using this tomorrow, do I just go sign up and start using it, or is there any kind of setup required?
Yeah. I mean, you basically just sign up and come to our website. You sign up. We do set you up. So you will actually get you'll be contacted by our support to set you up, but you can totally sign up for the product and you never have to talk to me or my salespeople. That's fine. And you can see why you'd want to do that because I love talking about this stuff. I love this product. And so I will get on with lawyers and talk their ear off about, well, do you like to put your date before the document or after the document and stuff like that? So you don't have to get involved with that, but we're happy to do it. We're happy to give that support as well.
It's a good thing that you're passionate about your product and that it comes from your own experience as well. So those are all good things. Anything else that you wanted viewers to know about this before we wrap?
No, I would say, the one question that I get a lot that feel like I should take on, which is the question about AI and where do products like this. I've described to you some AI things we're going to do with the product, but I think a big question in general is kind of where do sort of really non-AI products fit into the legal ecosystem today. And you're not going to be surprised by what I have to say, which is that legal AI is certainly the frontier and where a lot of the action is and where a lot of what's going to be exciting is going to be changing, transformative to the profession is happening. But I cannot emphasize, if you look inside these law firms, how many people are using paper and how many people are still, writing with, with pens on legal pads or carrying binders around and whatever. And this isn't just true about my product, but these products that help lawyers sort of get past that last mile and get off of the desk and onto the iPad or onto the computer are needed, are critical, and frankly, all the AI in the world ain't going to solve that problem.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I thought about actually asking you about that before we recorded, and I decided, A, like you say, yeah, a lot of lawyers are nowhere near using AI, let alone getting off of paper. But B, really, this is a product about around organizing, and I don't know that AI is very good at that yet. I mean, it can do it can be good at sort of taking a set of information and organizing it into a spreadsheet or something like that. But then it's kind of a it gets kind of it's a sort of a static use case, I think, for AI. In terms of what you're doing here and helping litigators do, it seems like I don't see AI as being all that useful at it yet. So I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
I guess I would say in AI's defense that I think on, so for example, the situation of, being able to say, the partner who barks down the hall at the poor, junior associate, I got to go in and meet with the client tomorrow. And I need the documents from that binder you put together for me 3 months ago, but also I need the one that I highlighted. The truth is, AI could take that in, and sure, the associate will probably look it over one time before it goes to the partner. But for example, you can imagine an AI-enabled version of our product that goes and finds those documents, sticks them into a new binder, and puts them in an organized fashion. That actually, I think it could be pretty good. This is not AI writing briefs. This is not AI, any of that sort of thing. But I actually think one of the amazing powers of AI is that it takes these tasks that before AI, you could almost imagine they could be automated, but they couldn't quite because there was just some little bit of, non-determinism or judgment that was needed in there. And AI actually really helps on those, but they still were tasks that were terrible, right? They were renaming files or they were things like that. And AI can actually kind of close that last little gap. And I think it'll be useful for things like that.
All right. Well, AI thanks you for that defense. All right, Sam. Well, I really appreciate your coming on the show and telling us all about this. It's really interesting.
Good. Well, thanks for having me. It's been great.
We'll have notes in the show notes, but anybody watching this right now, it's align.lawyer is where you'll find more information about it, or in the App Store, I guess.
Exactly.
All right. Sam, thanks a lot. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bob.